Hey guys, if you're wondering if you should choose between the Canon T7i and the Lumix GH4, then this is probably a good video for you, so stick around. What's up guys, my name is Tyler Kidd and I own a video production company called Tube Edits. So yeah, I just bought the GH4 a couple months ago and I purchased the Canon T7i at the beginning of this year, so I want to give you my thoughts on those. So I'm gonna dive into the pros and cons of each and then decide who takes the cake on a certain subject. So first up, we have the Canon T7i, and I think this is a great camera for a beginner, for anybody looking to do photography, or anybody who's trying to do vlogs like YouTube and kind of stuff. So overall, I think it's good for those things. All right, so we're gonna start with the pros of the Canon T7i. So what I really like about the T7i is it has a user-friendly menu. So for beginners and stuff like that, it's super easy. I had never used a DSLR before, so using the Canon T7i, I got to learn everything about the DSLRs like shutter speed, all that good stuff, and it was really easy for me. Another pro is it has 49 autofocus points. So this means it can track my face really easily when I'm doing vlogs and everything. So that's why I really like it, and I hate trying to actually focus. So Canon, you get a win there. Another pro about the Canon T7i is that it has Wi-Fi. So I don't really use Wi-Fi that often with my cameras, but today when I was actually filming this YouTube video, I realized that, you know, it actually kind of helped. I was trying to autofocus with my phone, and it's easier to see it on my phone closer over here than it is to where the camera is over there. So I really liked, you know, being able to use it for that, but I honestly don't use the Wi-Fi that often. Now, a huge pro for the Canon T7i is the in-body stabilization. So with this camera, I don't need to throw it on a gimbal or anything like that. In camera, it looks great. You know, you don't really get the camera jitters and all that stuff. Like, I really trust my Canon T7i to not shake on me and get those camera shakes. So I really love the IBIS on that. It's my go-to for that. All right, so fifth pro, I really like Canon Color Science. It's really easy to work with, really easy to color grade. Like, the colors out of Canon are awesome. The skin tones, you don't have to mess with them at all. It's just on point, it's great. Another pro of the Canon T7i is it can shoot up to 60 frames per second. It's not the best, you know, like the new Note 9 can shoot like 640 frames per second, so that's dumb. But yeah, 60 frames is great. You can still shoot slow-mo. Yeah, that's a win. All right, so some of the cons with the Canon T7i is it only shoots in 1080p, so you're still getting HD video, but it's not quite 4K like everybody's expecting, so that's a bummer. Another con is that the Canon T7i has a crop sensor, so I believe, I could be wrong, the crop is like 1.5, so it's not full frame. You're not getting actual 50 millimeter out of your lens. You're probably getting like 60 or something. I haven't done the math, so don't quote me on that. But it's not a full frame, so you have to multiply it a little bit. The lens is gonna be zoomed in a little bit more. So I dislike that, but it's not really the end of the world. Another con I noticed with the Canon T7i, which is kind of also a pro, is the low light capability. The T7i is supposed to be really good in low light, but when I was first doing videography with the Canon T7i, I noticed a lot of noise and grain in my footage. So these DSLRs can only shoot in about like 10 stops of dynamic range, whereas our eyes see upwards of like 20, and cinema cameras shoot at like 16 to 18. So that's also an issue with the low light capabilities of these kinds of cameras, but it's not that bad. The sensor in the Canon is supposed to be good, so that's kind of up in the air. And the Canon T7i is $1,000, so it's pretty pricey, but it is the newest version of the Rebel series, so that's why you're paying that high price point. You could probably get the T6i or the T5i for, you know, around $500–600, and that would do you just fine. The only issue is it doesn't have as many autofocus points, and it doesn't have Wi-Fi. So, I mean, if those things really matter to you, then spend the extra $400 or $500 to get the Canon T7i. Otherwise, I would definitely recommend getting a T5 or T6i or even a T3i that's like $300 just to start out. All right, so now we're moving on to the GH4. I think the GH4 is a really great camera for overall video production for somebody who's doing intermediate work. And this camera is only $600, the GH4. And I'm gonna go over why later I would rather purchase the GH5, but it is cheaper than the T7i. All right, so some of the pros of the GH4, why I initially bought it was it has focus peaking. So it doesn't have great autofocus. That's in fact one of the cons, but it does have focus peaking. So when I'm racking focus, it shows it on the screen and I can see where I'm trying to focus. So that is awesome. And it also has zebra pattern exposure. So that also does the same thing where it helps me see if I'm overexposed and everything like that. So I really like that on the GH4. The GH4 also has Wi-Fi. I haven't experimented with the Wi-Fi as much, but like I said, there's really no need to use Wi-Fi with your camera, so it's more of a gimmicky kind of thing. So another pro of the GH4 is that it shoots 4K. So it's just a spec powerhouse. It shoots 1080p at 100 megabytes per second. So if you're actually getting into video production and you're wanting clients to pay you money for video production, this is a good camera to go for because it has the specs and the quality to produce the good quality video. And as far as frames per second go, I am also considering this as a pro. It shoots up to 96 frames per second. However, I do only shoot in 60 frames per second because then I'm getting more of that 100 megabits per second while I'm shooting. So if you shoot at 96 megabits per second, then you're only getting a megabit per second in that slow-mo. So it's higher quality if you shoot the 60 frames per second, but it can do it, so that's awesome. Now, some of the cons of the GH4 are it's a little bit difficult to use. The menu systems on it are a little bit more advanced. It's not like the Canon where the Canon has a beginner and advanced mode. The GH4 is just like, hey, we expect you to know what you're doing. So that kind of makes it difficult. Another con is that I am used to shooting with Canon colors, so when I switched over to the GH4, I hated the color science of the GH4. I think it sucks, honestly, but you know, it's just something you gotta work around, you gotta learn to live with, and you gotta learn how to color grade. So I'm not the best color grader, but granted, Canon color science is way better than the GH4. Another con of the GH4 is that it doesn't have in-body stabilization. So when I want to go and do run and gun shoots, I have to throw my gimbal on there in order for it to stay smooth. So that's a big issue for me. I really liked having the in-body stabilization on the Canon, and I see every little camera shake in the GH4 when I don't have any sort of stabilization on. So that really bugs me. All right, so another con is the GH4 is on a micro four thirds system. So if I want to add any of my old Canon glass to the GH4, I have to purchase an adapter called a speed booster, which is like $600, which is the price of another lens. So that's irritating. Another con with the GH4 is the sensor has a 2x crop. So any lens you put on there is gonna be twice that focal length. So if I have a 50 mil on there, it's gonna be like 100 mil. So that sucks. You know, having a full frame would be awesome because then you could shoot a lot wider. You can get into those tight spaces and everything. So that's a big con for me, is not having that full frame. And of course, another con for me with the GH4, just because it's in the lower range of DSLRs, is the low light performance. Technically, it's supposed to do really good low light performance, but it's not as good as some cinema cameras. You know, we talked about the 10 stops of dynamic range versus a cinema camera that gets upwards of 18 stops of dynamic range, and that just helps you with your highlights and your shadows and everything. All right, now looking at both of them side by side, comparing them and seeing who takes the cake, based on menus, I'm gonna say Canon wins. It's super easy, a lot easier than the GH4. As far as low light goes, they both kind of suck. So, you know, you're not running a cinema camera, like I said. If you want the dynamic range, get the GH5. As far as the sensors go, I would say it's a tie. The Lumix GH4 has a better sensor in a sense because it shoots 4K, but I feel like the Canon sensor is a little bit better because of the color science and because of the 1.5 times crop instead of the 2 times crop. And as far as Wi-Fi goes, I'm gonna say it's a tie because like I said, I don't really care. It's more of like a gimmicky thing. As far as resolution goes, the GH4 takes this because it shoots in 4K, not in 1080. As far as stabilization goes, the Canon takes the win because it has the in-body stabilization. Yeah, obvi. And for color science, I talked about this plenty of times, definitely. The winner goes to the Canon T7i. As far as frames per second, we're gonna say that the GH4 is the winner for this because it can shoot 96 frames per second, so it's got 36 more frames on the T7i, so yeah, it obviously wins that. As far as focus difficulty level goes, I would say they're almost even because they both focus in different ways, but I would say the Canon T7i is the winner for this because it's more of a point and shoot. You can point it wherever you need to and it'll be in focus. Whereas the GH4 is a lot more of a hassle. As far as exposing the image correctly, I would say this one goes to the GH4 because it has those zebra patterns. It's a lot easier for me to see what's overexposed in my image as opposed to looking at the histogram on the Canon T7i. As far as specs go, I'm gonna give this one to the GH4 because this guy has everything you need for video production. Mind you, my review might be biased because I produce videos for a living, so that's why I purchased the GH4 because it was a spec beast and it has the 100 megabits per second for 1080p video. So yes, GH4, you take it. Now for the vlogger, if you're wanting to get into vlogging, I would definitely suggest, highly suggest, the Canon T7i or a version below that. Just because of the autofocus on it, it's so much easier to walk around and have the autofocus track your face the whole time as opposed to trying to grab focus all day. So it makes it a lot more fun for everybody. And as far as photos go, I would say the Canon as well because of the color science, the ease of use, you know, for beginners, and the autofocus. Canon for photos, for show. And I've said this a couple times, but as far as video production goes, it's for the GH4. That's why I purchased it. And if you're doing video production and you want a cheap video production camera, I would highly suggest getting the GH4. It is awesome, it does great, but it is an intermediate camera, so it is difficult to use. You gotta know how to focus and stuff, like if you gotta practice, you know? So ultimately, at the end of the day, comparing both cameras, I wish I would have just bought the GH5 as a video producer. It just has everything. It's got 10-bit color, it's got vlog, it's got in-body stabilization. So for the price that I paid for both of these cameras, I could have gotten the GH5 and just focused on learning that. So if you're looking into producing videos and you're looking into getting your first camera, I would highly suggest the GH5. But if you're on a budget, then these two cameras are great as well. Mind you, the Canon T7i is $1,000 because it's still new, but you can get that T6i for probably about the same price as a GH4. So that's the review. I hope you guys stuck around. I hope you guys liked it. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like this video and subscribe, and have a good day. Bye.